Hello dear chess friends. You are now about to watch a very fascinating game between two strong grandmasters who had their best time in the 40s of the last century. Ragozin is known to many for his contributions to opening theory. Just think of the Ragozin variation of the Queen's Gambit declined. Then he also was a sparring and trainings partner of Mikhail Botvinnik and could manage to win the World Championship title in correspondence chess. Boleslavsky was even stronger than Ragozin. His best result was the tied first place in the 1951 Candidates Tournament. Only in the last round could David Bronstein catch up to him. In the playoffs, Bronstein won and then finally went on to face Mikhail Botvinnik in the famous World Championship final, where he managed a 10-10 result, which however was sufficient for Botvinnik to retain his World Championship title. Now let's start with our game. e4, c6. Boleslavsky, who is known as an expert on the Sicilian defense, here chose to play the Caro-Kann. With hindsight, we know he should have better stuck to his Sicilian. d4, d5, knight c3, the main line. And here black has to make choice between the lines knight e7, knight f6 and bishop f5. I personally prefer the bishop f5 variation, the Capablanca variation, because it gives black very rich pawn structure. The whole positional setting here is very complex, so this is what I personally prefer, demanding pawn structures which gives me the chance to put my opponent under long-lasting positional pressure. But here Boleslavsky preferred to play knight f6. After knight f6, black should not take back with the g-pawn. This is a line Raymond Keane once propagated in a book he wrote in the 80s, and then there was a fashion of g takes f6. I personally also played that gf6 line, but it's positionally unsound. So e takes f6 is the much better move here. Personally, I don't like to play with doubled pawns, and of course here we have also a very rustic kind of pawn structure. This position mostly is about piece play, and as I just said a couple of minutes before, this position for my taste lacks the subtlety or the profoundness of deep pawn structures which can fall apart into sub pawn structures or substructures. This is a more simple pawn structure. It's about piece play, but I have to acknowledge this is just my personal taste. Objectively, this line is perfectly okay for black. So now let me just say what the main line would be here. In our game we saw bishop c4. The main line would continue with c3, bishop d6. Now the h7 pawn is under attack. And now for decades, I would say, black players answered with the move h6, granting white a slight opening advantage. Then someone found out that h5 might be a better idea, and after castling h4, this position is more or less equal. The h-pawn is making itself quite useful. Black now not only prevents knight g3, but might threaten to push h4, h3. This discovery led to a reappraisal of the e takes f6 Caro-Kann and is responsible for the fact that this is a very fashionable line amongst strong players nowadays. In our game, however, white played not c3 but bishop c4, which also looks like a reasonable move. Now black could play bishop e7, but he did play bishop d6. Bishop e7 is, I think, not a bad way in order to try to equalize. But there is nothing wrong with bishop d6. White, of course, can now take the opportunity and check the king. Because now, after queen e7, we see white having a slight advantage due to the better pawn structure. Black should not reduce his dynamic potential. And this is a rule of thumb for everyone listening, not only for this position. It is a general rule of chess. If you have a static disadvantage, and I would say this pawn structure is potentially better for white, just think of the pawn ending. The pawn ending would outright be won for white, as white could create a passed pawn on the queen side, while black couldn't do the same on the king side. So if you have a disadvantage in a static manner, you should strive to get dynamic compensation for it. So you should not reduce your dynamic potential. Exchanging queens would just do that, and that's why black must keep his queens here on the board. We should also not forget one fact. Black has the better king safety here because he has 4 pawns protecting his king on the king side, while white only has his 3 pawns there. That's why black should not exchange queens. Knight f3, castles, castles. And now in the game we saw bishop d6, and that move was quite okay, but there is an alternative here. I'm showing you this move not because I want to make this an opening theoretical contribution. I mean, you know my videos, I always pay attention to opening theory, so I want to give you added value by that in order not only to give you the middle game ideas. This is basically a middle game video, but also some additional opening knowledge. You know that already. But I give you this move here in order to show you an interesting endgame position. Because once we find out that black doesn't have to shy away from entering endgames with this very pawn structure, it makes it much more easy to play this line with black. So we are now going quickly through the following moves. This is just a line, a side line, in order to show you that black doesn't have to fear the endgames. So this move knight e6 is stronger than f takes e6. Black could have straightened out his pawn structure. F e6 is a possibility, but this is even better. Black doesn't have to undouble his pawns here. This is a quite interesting fact about this position. And now let's see what happens if white really tries to exploit his majority in the center or on the queen side in order maybe to create a passed pawn there. So d5, this is very straightforward play. I just analyzed this in order to figure out for myself, is this really something black has to fear? Look for yourself. So now there are 2 options. We could, as white, take with a rook or with a c-pawn. Now with a c-pawn, now this means that we have a passed pawn, but this passed pawn is not dangerous for white. It cannot go to d6. It is more weak than strong here, and that's why this position is equal. After knight c7, attacking the pawn, bishop b6, rook c8, queen b3, h5, creating some air and expanding on the king side. rook e3, knight b5. The engine says equality. The d5 pawn is securely limited here, cannot go to d6, and there's nothing really white can hope for in this position, right? Where should white play? He has to keep his d5 pawn defended, and this ties his pieces to that task, right? And there's nothing black should worry about. So let's now see the alternative here, rook d5. Now, of course, white has this 3 versus 2 pawn majority on the queen side, which has some potential. But even this is nothing black must fear. Queen c6, attacking the d5 rook. Takes, b3, stabilizing the pawn. Bishop c5. Yeah, the e3 bishop was quite active there, so black exchanges bishops, not fearing further simplification. And now white, okay, wants to go to the endgame. The pawn endgame would actually be one for white, so this is what white is striving for, right? But now after g6, creating air for the king, the engine gives equality. Why is that? The reason for equality is that it is not so easy to push the pawn on the queen side for white to play b3, b4. First of all, you have to control the square b4, and then also you should not lose your c-pawn in the progress, right? And then black can, if this might be a threat, play a5, so it's not so easy to push the majority. And then, as I mentioned before, black's king safety is better, so very often black has counterplay against white's king side. For instance, after queen d7, attacking the pawn, queen f5, queen a3 is also good here. Takes, check. Now f2 is under attack. Let's say this is defended by queen b6, king g7. There is no way how white could progress here. Cannot play c5 because of queen takes f2. Cannot play b4 because of queen takes c4. And also don't forget, there's sometimes the idea to give this queen f4, queen c1 perpetual check. Yeah, black has a much safer king. You know, this pawn here on the f6 is quite useful because it prevents the knight from approaching the square f7. Imagine a white queen on the 7th rank, then knight e5 would be an idea, but this is not possible. And black could even try to attack here with these pawn moves. So this position is completely fine for black. And once you have found out this, it is quite easy to adopt this line here with black. If you don't even have to fear the endgame, what bad can happen to you then? But now let's go back to our game. Black played bishop d6. Well, he started with bishop d6, then went to e7, and then back to d6. But yeah, this has all some reason. First of all, by giving the check on e2 with the queen, in order to exploit the initial bishop d6, white forfeited the option to play his knight to e2, and basically the knight is better placed on e2. Then now we see the queen in the e file potentially exposed to an attack by black's rook. So that's not so much that white has gained, you know, from this check on e2. So bishop d6, we just saw rook e8 as an alternative, but bishop d6 is also pretty fine. Rook e1, of course, preventing rook e8. And now came a mistake. Black played bishop g4. This is a mistake which was proven to be one with this game here in 1942. But we see a lot of strong players, mostly in blitz games, to 400 to 500 players, and we even see a 2600 player with black playing this move in a tournament game. I come to this a bit later. As we know, everything is new that is well forgotten. Yeah, this is what they say. Apparently, this was so far away in the past, this game, that many contemporary players forgot about this move being bad. But for those who are interested in black's position to play the e takes f6 Caro-Kann with black, I want to show you the better alternative here. I think a5 is a good move, gaining space and preparing knight a6. Maybe black could even play knight a6 outright, but a5 is a good move. c3, knight a6, queen c2, knight c7, bishop d3, attacking the pawn, g6, h3, preventing bishop g4, knight e6. That's a good square for the knight, with the option to go to f4 at some stage. Also, there is some potential pressure against the d4 pawn in case white plays c4. Bishop d2, queen c7. And now I don't know exactly how this position should be evaluated. Might be a bit better for white, but not very much so, if at all. In any case, if white now plays c4, his advantage will evaporate. Now the idea is to play a3 to prevent bishop e4, but black anticipates this. This is a strong move, bishop e4, creating some space for his pieces, because white's pawn structure, the pawn duo d4 c4, took away some space of black's pieces, and if you exchange off pieces, this space advantage created by both pawns doesn't count for much anymore. Space advantage is only useful if there are a lot of pieces on the board. This is just a general rule of thumb. Rook d1, rook d8. The d4, of course, is a bit weak, so bishop f1, protecting that pawn here. King g7, queen c1, takes, bishop d7, queen c3, rook e8. And now white could play rook e3. And after rook c8, the engine says equality. Although white has a majority on the queen side, but white cannot do much with this majority. Let's have a look at what happens if d5 is being played in order to exploit this majority outright. Okay, black takes. He could, by the way, even play knight c5 here, letting d6 happen, but after queen b8 this is an equal position because the d6 pawn is no danger to black. It's safely blocked and it's potentially weak. This is equal according to the engine, but let's have a look at the more natural move, c takes d5, right? Now black can take with a pawn, and this would then be equal. This is an equal position. The c3 is quite weak, right? And the e4 knight is very active, so equality is understandable as a verdict here. But what I find quite interesting is that after rook takes d5, bishop c6, it is black who might be slightly better already. And I just show you this line in order to tell you this structure here with white having a solid majority on the queen side can even lead to troubles for white. So black has the initiative. At least he has an edge here, like 0.2 advantage. But maybe he has even a bit more than that. I give you some examples. So the best line white could play is rook d3. And here black has an edge actually. He has a better minor piece because the f1 bishop is not the best of all minor pieces. And his king is a bit safer. And black might push his h-pawn, h5, h4. So it's like 0.2 advantage for black here according to the engine. What else do I have? Rook dd1. So g3, I mean, in order to play bishop g2, in order to activate the bishop, also deprive black's pieces of the f4 square. Now black wants to double in the d file and does so. And here black could, for instance, take on g2, check. And now he pushes his kingside pawns, and this is a privilege black has in the structure. He has 4 pawns, so he can be a bit more liberal with pushing the pawns. This f7 pawn gives additional stability to the king side, not only preventing or not only stabilizing the knight on e6, but also protecting the king along the 7th rank, of course. And now you see g4 is a threat, so the king has to go away from the long diagonal. Queen c5, getting in contact with the f2 pawn. King g2, overprotecting f2 again. So here you see that black has the initiative. There's this queen c6 check playable, and then the squares f3, h3 are quite weak. So the king of white is not that comfortable here. Black has a slight advantage. But black has also another option. He could play rook d7 here, intending queen d8 in order to pressurize here white in the d file, while the e file where white's rook stand is sealed off by the knight. The knight is very strongly placed on e6, sealing off the e file, looking to the square d4. Let's say bishop takes c6 and now b takes c6, and even though white has 3 versus 2 pawn majority, black is slightly better here because his pieces are more active. He owns the d file, he owns the squares, the d3 and d4. He has a safer king. And in case of doubt, piece activity is more important than pawn structure. Don't forget this. The pieces are the big guns. The pawns are only the helpers of the pieces. So piece activity above pawn structure normally. So now the idea is to play c5, and then we have the d4 square in our hands. So if white plays c5 to prevent this, we see the c5 pawn here being a bit weak. White is very passive because black is ruling the d file, putting pressure on the c5 pawn, and might advance with his pawn on the king side. So I think I gave you some ideas of what are the qualities of the anti-e takes f6 variation. Now let's go back to our game where black committed a mistake. Bishop g4 question mark. This can be exploited by the strong move queen e4. Now followed another mistake by black. Black played bishop h5. Let's have a look at the alternatives. The best move here is actually bishop d7. It's very meek, but it's the best. It limits the damage. For instance, bishop d3, f5, queen e2. Now, in contrasting other lines we have seen earlier, the white knight has the square e5 available, and after rook e8, queen d1 takes, white has an advantage of about half a pawn. He has this solid majority on the queen side and this e5 square for his knight. Another game saw f5. Actually, we see here a British grandmaster having the black pieces, Daniel Gormley. So also Mr. Gormley, he fell for this, let's call it opening trap. You know, he played this bishop g4 move, which was a mistake. He followed up with f5, but after queen d3 takes, queen h4, question mark. White is clearly better anyways, but now white could even have won with bishop takes f7. Let's just show what I mean here with my verdict that white is winning. If the king takes, the king has to go now to a little journey into the open. Okay, black just prevented the loss of a piece here. but after g3, queen h5 takes, queen takes b7, check, king g2, queen d4. White is just winning. Black has no counterplay anymore. Now the rook is very strong, stronger than the two minor pieces, and white already has 2 pawns. So this is one for white. That leaves black after bishop takes f7 with rook takes f7. So the king doesn't have to wander around. But after rook e8, now if bishop f8, bishop f4, white is winning because the b8 knight is pinned and will fall. So let's say rook f8 instead. Check, takes, and now very important not to play. It's important not to play queen takes b7. This would lose instantly because we see black threatening checkmate here. White would have to exchange queens and would lose. But bishop g5 exclamation mark, clearing the first rank for the rook. Now there is no first rank problem anymore, and now we can grab the rook on a8 and then attack the b8 knight, the a7 pawn, bringing in our rook to e1, which is clearly one for white. Okay, that was the f5 move in the game Gudrian against Gormley Amsterdam 2015. But now let's continue with our game, bishop h5. Now comes a really strong move, knight h4 exclamation mark. The knight is fantastically placed there. What can black do? If black plays knight a6, and the game happened knight d7, right? Normal move, right? The only other normal development move would be knight a6. This is a best move, by the way. But now white could simply liquidate accordingly. Takes, bishop d2, and we see now white has really the much better pawn structure here. Black has too many double pawns, and the c6 is also isolated. So that's a clear advantage for white. So it is understandable that black did not love to play knight a6. But as it turns out, knight d7 is even worse. And this position happened in contemporary a game against two strong players. Kokarev, a player with 2.579 ELO, against the famous Alexei Dreyev, Sochi 2021. So even a guy like Dreyev, he fell for this opening trap. So it's not a trivial one. It's not trivial what I'm showing you today. So now in the game Kokarev-Dreyev, white played knight f5 question mark, and after bishop g6, white only had a slight advantage. But Ragozin, and this is proof of his strength, he found in 1942, he found the right move. He played queen f5, attacking the bishop. Well, now quite easily to spot is the fact that bishop g6 doesn't work. Takes, and the f-pawn is pinned. What else? In the game we saw knight b6. Let's have a look at g6. This move looks not really nice for black, as it takes away the flight square g6 of the black's bishop. After queen h3, black is confronted with g2, g4, winning the bishop. So let's say knight b6, bishop d3, and now if queen d7, there's a strong move, knight f5, exclamation mark. Of course, if pawn takes f5, either queen takes h5 or bishop takes f5 first, and then queen takes h5 would be winning. And after rook e8, bishop d2, rook f8, g4, white is also winning. Black has to take on f5, but bishop takes f5 followed by queen takes h5 is winning. After bishop d3, what do we have? Knight d5 instead of queen d7, but after g4, queen d7, pinning the g-pawn. Again, it is knight f5, unpinning the g-pawn and just winning for white. So after queen f5, black played not bishop g6, not pawn g6, but knight b6. In order to prepare to bring in his queen later for the battle on the king side, by clearing this square d7 and the diagonal c8, h3, with gain of tempo, as now the bishop b3, the bishop c4 is hanging. Now white could play a move like bishop b3, and after g6, queen h3, rook e8, bishop h6, bishop e2, knight f5 exclamation mark, queen d7, takes. White would be clearly better in this position. Two bishops, better pawn structure, right? But much better than this is the move queen takes h5 exclamation mark. Ragozin, he was known for his good calculative skills. He was a very dynamic player and he was on top of the game. By taking here on h5, forfeiting the other line, which would have been a very easy road to clear advantage, but he saw that he had more than that. Knight takes c4, and this position now is extremely interesting. You can pause here and try to find out what would be white's best move. I show you now the second best. The engine says that queen e2 is the second best move, but after rook e8 we see an endgame which is only slightly better for white. This is not really much, so black should draw this game quite easily, even though he has to work a bit for that. But now look at this position again. What can white do? Here's a real shocker move in play now. Bishop h6, this is our topical move. If you have seen previous videos, you know that I'm pouring my collection of bishop h6 examples over you, but I think not to your disadvantage. I think this is a very entertaining topic, and as you see here again in this example, I combine it with interesting opening theoretical discussions. This move bishop h6 now presents a new motive. We have seen many different motives, you know, gaining time in order to bring in the queen through a1, forcing black to redevelop, you know, by playing bishop f8, freezing black's king side, you know, the freezer motive. You have seen a lot of different motives. This one is meant to be destroying the king's pawn shield. It's a direct attack against the castled king. So this is the new thing of this game. The new twist of my bishop h6 collection. There is no defense against this very brute but efficient attack against the g7 pawn. In the game we saw black playing queen d7 in order to bring the queen over to help out there on the king side. Let's first see what happened if black took the bishop. Now knight f5 is winning, but let's just skip this line. No, I wanted to skip it, sorry. The best move here is actually b3. First pushing the knight away to the far queen side, right? And now playing knight f5, of course, mate in 2 is threatened, okay? Now what can black play? One move would be bishop f4, rook e4, queen c7, g3, bishop g5, h4. And now the bishop will fall, and then the dark squares on the king side are problematic for black, so white is easily winning. King h8 is the other move. Takes. And now black covered the g7 square. Now you might want to have another look. Press on pause if you like. Now white has a very thematic win. It's a standard move, and the move is rook e8. It's called deflection. Well, we want to deflect the rook, that's clear, but we also would love to deflect the queen. It's also quite obvious that this is very desirable for white. So black can neither take the rook with the queen nor the rook. So bishop f8 only move. But after rook d8, bishop h6 takes. The endgame is won for white in all occasions. So white has a clearly won endgame, as also the f7 pawn is under attack. I spare you the lines here, okay? You can check it out for yourself. Now, in the game we saw queen d7 happening. First and foremost, in order to take the square g4 away of white's queen. But now white went on to be very, very destructive. Takes, check, king h8, rook e4. And now we see that not only the g7 square is a problem for black in the structure, but also the h7 point. Rook h4 is the threat. Bishop h2. The idea is, if white takes with a king, which is possible, which is winning, but which is only the second best move, black could continue with knight d6. Now after rook h4, due to the knight on d6, queen takes f5 would be possible. So instead black or white has to take the knight, check, king g1, rook g8. So black comes in time to protect the pawn h7 with rook g7 if necessary. So after rook h4, rook g7 would save the day. But now white grabs a pawn, and this position here is just a 1 because white has an extra pawn, a better pawn structure and more active pieces. This is also an easy win, even though it will maybe take some more moves. In our game, the strong player Raguzin, he played king h1. This is how you play it. Because if now knight d6, we just could take on d6, and now queen takes d6 is not a check anymore, right? There's no king on h2. Rook h4 would simply win by delivering checkmate on h7. This is how the game concluded with the strong move king h1. So this is a classical masterpiece. I hope you liked it. See you again in my next video then. Bye bye.